Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Nephew, 628 County Road B East. And if anyone wants to know my phone number, it arrived in your mailbox probably on Friday. And I welcome any comments or opinions. I'm, of course, a member of the City Council. Dale had some good points. I'm primarily here to talk about the organized hauling issue. Dale had some good points about the statute. I want to take a slightly different angle on it to give people some food for thought, because sometimes when people call and they say, I can't believe you're doing this, what business do you have getting into this? Government should stay out of trash, and they say, let the free market work. Well, I have to tell you that to think that trash hauling represents the free market in any way in America today is completely naive. What we have here is a service. It's not just a service that you can pick to choose. It is the law in Maplewood with criminal penalties, as I understand it, that you must have a trash hauler. The law says you must have a trash hauler visit your house once a week. Once a week, a trash hauler has to come to your house to take away trash. So even if you want to bring it all to the pay dump, the law in the books still says a trash hauler has to come. Not only that, you're given choice of a list of government-approved trash haulers who are licensed to do business in the city of Maplewood. So we have a situation where there is an individual mandate from the government telling you as an individual, you must buy this service, and here is the limited list of people that you're allowed to buy it from. And when I, as a government official looking out for the interests of my constituents, say, shouldn't we put a little effort into making sure our residents are getting the best deal? Shouldn't we put a little effort into making sure that these service providers are being efficient, that they're not in a situation where they don't care about efficiency because they can always pad it up on the bottom line to get their profit margins? But we're told that even wanting to talk about that and examine it and go through a process of questioning whether this is the most efficient and the best value for our residents is anti-free market. That's not free market. And the representative that sends this out to people, he's not standing up for capitalism or American values. He's standing up for the profits that exist under the existing system, and he just wants to protect the status quo with whatever argument seems to fit at this moment. So I think it's just really important for people to think that. Ask yourself, if it wasn't just Dale's example about all that hoops you had to go through, but if in addition, the state law and the local law both said, oh, and by the way, you must hire someone to remodel your house every year, whether you actually want to do it or not. That would give us a better analogy to what this situation is like. And so, as somebody who cares a great deal about fiscal responsibility, I think that we have a duty as a city to go down this path and consider these options. And otherwise, maybe it's not considered a tax because you're putting the cash directly in the pocket of a private company, but when it's a service that you are required to get by the government, it seems to me that saving money for our residents there is just the same as if we were saving it on a tax or a fee for some other thing that the government required them to do. The other quick thing that I wanted to touch on also relates to the idea of the statute and the complexity of the process to do this. And that is that while Dale did a good job of outlining how difficult it is to go through this process just to have a discussion about whether the status quo is the best, it's not at all difficult to go the other way. As far as I can tell, under the law, any city in the state that had organized collection, and presumably they'd have to stick with a contract that they already have until its terms expire. But at that point, they could drop it and switch to open hauling without so much as a public hearing. So you would think that if all of the implied problems that we hear about, all these residents believe that costs will rise, that residents believe that service will get bad, well, if it was true, and not just a belief of residents that didn't have any experience with it, why don't we hear about an outcry in those cities? Why have I never heard of a single Minnesota city, certainly in the last 20 years since this law has been on the books, going and dropping organized collection in favor of the supposed free market? Well, I think that speaks volumes, because you would suppose that in any one of those cities, it would be trivially easy, if there were widespread problems that everybody agreed on, to pressure their local elected officials or to elect a slate of candidates that ran on that as a platform issue. But we're just hearing the chirping of crickets from all those cities. I've asked a lot of mayors and council members of cities that have organized collection. I say, what's the deal? And they're like, oh, it's all great. We love it. Wouldn't switch it for anything. So that is something, when you see the people that are turned out against it, to hold in your mind. What is the level of information, and what about the people that actually have experience with it and could, with a lot less effort, switch away? So those are my thoughts on that, and while I'm here, if anybody has any other questions of me from there, I certainly would invite you to ask.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I was forewarned there might be
one
one.
of the things that we were talking about, government involvement, and I'm a real novice in this, and but I have my thoughts about the environment. But I believe that don't our tax dollars pay for management of all the landfill sites where all our trash goes? I think that the state of Minnesota pays about $190 million a year managing our trash. And I find that kind of like, it doesn't quite make sense
Right.
so far as like not having the government involved. And then I think about if I were in the trash hauling business, it probably wouldn't behoove me to want people to reduce their waste because then my revenue goes down. But I mean, like Eureka, who has, the plan of zero waste, and as people in a world with losing space and all our natural resources, that we should really be moving towards that. So anyway, just the government involvement thing, I was like, well, wait a minute, the government's managing all the landfill sites at high cost.
Commissioner Sherrill, you make a couple of great points. When it comes to, I'm not an expert on everything involved in regulation of landfills. I've done some research in the area. I know that many landfills are privately owned, but it's a highly regulated area, and one of the reasons that it's so regulated is because of the costs that have been shifted onto the public by not paying attention to this in the past. Minnesota has a closed landfill program, and I know that since it was set up, I don't recall exactly the date, I came across it recently, but within the last 20 years, it might have been 1994, they set up a deal where landfill operators could voluntarily enter this program and be relieved of future liability. And since that time, we have, as a state, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and only a small fraction of that has been reimbursed through charges that have been pursued against people that originally created the waste and disposed of it improperly, or the landfill companies that were supposed to be paying a portion of those expenses. So you're absolutely right. And if somebody asks the question, well, why are we forced to have a hauler? Why is the government giving us these mandates that offends my sense of liberty? It's because, dude, your liberty impinges upon my liberty. Your liberty to throw your motor oil in the swamp impinges upon the liberty of my daughters to grow up in a swamp that they can wade through without getting cancer. And so there is a long-standing government interest in making sure that waste is disposed of properly, and those are all the reasons that this makes sense. And there's just this point right at the consumer where there's an illusion of some kind of free market going on, but it's actually very much of a piece with so many other things where government has to watch out for everybody, because left to their own devices, an individual has an easy time pumping their cesspool onto the neighbor's property if they're given the chance, so that it's not their problem.
Commissioner Tripler.
I do have a little experience with the closed landfill program. I worked in it for 11 years, and I authored the report to the legislature, the annual report to the legislature about the closed landfill program from 1999 to 2005. You're right. We as citizens of Minnesota are proud owners of over 100 closed landfills in the state of Minnesota, and the annual cost does reach, it approaches about $100 million a year. And if you look on your bill, there is a charge that everybody pays every month that goes into this closed landfill program to pay for the cost of cleaning up, capping, and monitoring and running all these closed landfills that the state took over. One of the benefits of going organized is that it gives the city the opportunity, if it so chooses, to direct where the waste will go within the city of Maplewood. So if the city decides that it's in the everybody's best interest for the waste not to go into a landfill, we can put that in the contract for whoever we would hire. So from that standpoint, yeah, you're right. It gives us leverage we don't have right now.
Commissioners, any other questions for Councilman Nephew?
Just one more. One of the things that I was going to try to stress tonight to the people who are watching is that there will be people who will be coming next Monday who think this is a bad idea, which is fine. That's their right to do so. But we really need to hear from people who think it is a good idea. And so would you encourage people to contact you by email and or phone or whatever, and maybe talk a little bit about how
Sure.
how people who are in favor of this can voice their approval.
And I would say that I'm certain in speaking for the entire council that we all welcome all input, comments, questions, ideas, priorities, etc. The easiest way to do it is actually not by typing in all those individual email addresses, but city.council@ci.maplewood.mn.us. So if you find any city email address and just put city.council instead of the person's name at the beginning, that will be sent automatically to every member of the city council if you have a comment. I also certainly would encourage people to come to the hearing and to make their voices heard. I should say that I've been keeping track of the comments I've gotten from residents on this issue. I started doing that last year when there was an earlier public hearing. I can tell you that the percentage of favorable comments asking us to look at organization or simply to organize is running at double the percentage it was in October. So people are hearing more. The PR strategy of the waste group that puts out these mailings is to push people's buttons and to short circuit their critical thinking. And so I think actually the fact that it's been discussed in the public sphere and there's been an opportunity for some arguments of the merits on both sides of the issue has given a lot more people the chance to step back from kind of the buzzwords and hot buttons that get pushed in those letters. And the result of that has been more people coming out and saying, hey, this is actually a good idea. Or at least this is something we really should look at, because unless we do some of this planning to come up with a plan, we can't really compare it to what exists and decide if we like it better or not. You can always say, well, I don't want any change no matter what. But there are a lot of people that I talk to and I say, wow, tell me about your bill, and we go over it and we say, you could have the very same hauler or a comparable hauler in White Bear Lake today for the very same service level, very same container, and be paying perhaps 50% of what you're paying today. And maybe you don't mind paying that much more. Maybe you like that just for the idea that you could change someday and have a different colored truck stopping at the end of your road. But for me, those kinds of savings I think are well worth at least looking seriously into.
One more comment.
Commissioner Tripler.
I wanted to let you know, I've been living in Maplewood since 1985, and I just moved into a new home 2.5 years ago, and the bill for my waste hauler has always been in my name. When I got my letter, it was addressed to Joe Harkin. It was addressed to my significant other, not me, which I thought was kind of interesting since the bills are always in my name. Also, what I would like the council to realize, and I don't know if you've looked into it or not, but throughout the letter they encourage people to go onto their website and take their poll. I went on their website and I opened up the poll because I wanted to express my opinion that I was in favor of it. The only option you have in their poll is to check a box that says, yes, I'm opposed to organized collection. That's it.
If I may, Commissioner Tripler, the other thing that I found, there's a subtlety to that is particularly entertaining, and it makes me very skeptical of some of the comments that we get from people and how representative it is of the city at large. Unless you check that box, you have not authorized them to share what you say with the city. That same box that says I agree with you says I permit you to share my opinions with the city of Maplewood. So they actually